Hi, it's Jan from YouMakeItSimple.com, where I bring to you simple and easy sewing and crafting projects. Today in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make up your own single and double fold bias tape. So there's just a few items that you'll need to make your bias tape, and that is of course a piece of fabric. I like to just buy the fat quarters at the store, and they are 18 by 21 inches. Or you can just use the fabric that you have at home. I like to start working with a half of a yard of fabric, then it doesn't get so overwhelming and bulky. You can always cut it down if you need to. Smaller prints tend to be better. A rotary cutter, if you have one, they make cutting the long strips really easy. You can use a pair of scissors if you need to. You'll need a pair of scissors to trim the fabric. And if you want to, not necessary, but you can buy one of these bias tape makers. They are pretty reasonable in price, and they really do make it fun and easy and really quick. And your rotary mat and a rotary cutter, ruler, and an iron. So pick out some fun prints and let's get started. So let's just go over what bias tape is and what you use it for. Bias tape is a long strip of fabric that you use to bind the edges of fabric, or you can use it as a trim. You can purchase it in the store, and it only comes in solid colors and a very limited array of colors. And of course, I have never seen it in the store that has a print. That's what I love about making your own, is that you can make this cute trim that really makes a project pop if you have a cute bright print fabric on the trim. You can buy it and make it in there's several different sizes. You can make single fold and double fold. Single fold this is an inch single fold bias tape, and it, as you can see, is just flat piece with the edges ironed over and folded over once. A double fold bias tape it's just like this, but it's folded in half and pressed. So it looks like this. You can buy it in all different sizes. There's really wide and very narrow bias tape. My favorite is to use the 1/2 inch bias tape, and that's what we'll be making today. But you can make all different sizes. There's like 4 different sizes. I like 1/2 inch bias tape, and I use it quite a bit. Usually bias tape is made out of woven fabrics, but I do make some out of knit that is stretchy, and this does not have to be cut on the bias. So when you're making bias tape out of a knit fabric, you can just cut it on the straight grain. You can use the knit on, I've used it I've taken a new t-shirt, and instead of just having the boring ribbing on the neck, I've taken, this is just a strip of knit that I've cut in a strip and applied it like you would bias tape. And you can see how it curves around nicely. Even if this wasn't knit and this was fabric, it goes around corners really well and edges. That's the beauty of the bias, and we'll go over that in just a second here. But you can see how it curves around. Instead of, if this wasn't cut on the bias, it would be all bulky and twisted and everything. But you can see how I've applied it to this denim piece, and this is a double fold bias tape, and then we just fold it over, and then we'll stitch it. But look how cute that is. Look how that just pops, and that would be really cute on a fun upcycled denim project. And look how nice it just follows that curve. Here's another project that I've used bias tape on. This is just a cleaning apron that I have, and see how this is a purchased piece of bias tape, of course, but look how nice it goes around corners, and that is the beauty of it. You can also cut, you can also use these bias tape makers to cut out trim and that doesn't need to be on the bias. Like this apron has this trim, and this was not cut on the bias because it's not going around any corners. It's just a straight seam. You could use straight bias or straight tape on baby blankets and things, unless you're going around a corner. So just a few ideas. So you can buy different colors at the store, simple, boring, or you can make a bunch of fun different prints. This is really fun. It's a fun project. As you can see, I've made several of these up. I have several others, and they make fun gifts because most people don't know how to make this. If they sew, this would be a fun little gift to make up. So let's just talk about what bias is and what that means. In a woven fabric, you'll have the straight of grain, you'll have the salvaged edge, that's the edge that comes with it's the finished edge, and then you'll have the cut edge. And each way, when you pull it, it does not stretch. If I were even to pull it this way, it maybe has a little give, but not much stretch at all. But if I were to pull it on a diagonal, look how stretchy even this woven fabric is. See how that stretches? So the idea here is to cut out strips that are on the stretch. That way, when we pull it around or we move it around a corner, that it will give and stretch and lay flat. So that is what the bias is. If you hear that term, the bias is that diagonal place on the fabric that will stretch. So this is a fat quarter that I have bought at the store, and it measures 18 by 21 inches. If you are just buying fabric by the yard, I like to buy a half of a yard, and that will be a really nice amount of fabric to work with. And then you can cut it down, as you'll see in just a second, you can just cut off the extra and use it for another project. But even this fat quarter, I'm going to cut a little bit off. So we just take it, and I'm going to fold this top piece, it doesn't matter which piece, to make a triangle. I'm going to line up the edges here. And then I have this extra piece that we won't need. So I'm just going to trim that off. And I'm going to pull it sideways. This is the fold. And I'm going to take my scissors and just cut down the diagonal. So if you pull it, you can just cut a straight line there. Just hold your fabric. And that will give you two triangles. So I'm going to make it so it's easier and quicker. I'm just going to fold this up so my bias edge is along this long edge here, and bring it down. This is the folded edge. These are the cut edges. We're just going to cut strips here, and this will open up and make longer pieces. So for a 1/2 inch bias tape, I'm going to be cutting 2 inches, 2-inch strips. And that's as far as I'm going to go down, because these strips they'll be kind of short. I guess you could cut another one if you wanted to. But we'll be sewing these strips together. So you have different sizes here, and you'll have 2 of each piece. We're going to sew these together to make one continuous long strip of bias tape. We don't want to sew all the little pieces together, then you'll have seams really close together. So I'm just going to mix it up a bit. And let's just take it to the sewing machine and we'll sew these together. It doesn't really matter which order you sew them together. Let's just go over how we're going to place the pieces together. And you're probably wondering how in the heck that's going to happen. So we're going to take one of the strips, and you would think that you would sew them right sides together like this. But if we were to do that, when we opened it up, it would just make a right angle, and we don't want that. We want it to be one continuous strip. So you kind of have to wrap your head around this technique, and you can't go wrong by just bringing the right sides of the fabric together and making a right angle. What we want to happen here, our seam was going to be 1/4 inch, so I'm going to slide this down so these little tips are hanging over. This tip is hanging over about 1/4 inch, and the edges are even. I'm just going to take a ruler so you can just kind of see where, let me use this piece of cardboard, where we would be stitching. So we want to be stitching from the very corner of that square right there to the very corner here. And what that would look like would be to sew right in that corner, right down along until we hit that corner. If you come in too soon, it won't be a continuous straight line, and we'll show you how that. So look, when we open that up, that's going to be just one continuous strip. So we'll just go to the sewing machine, and I don't even pin mine together. I just take it, and it doesn't really matter how wide your seam is. What matters is how, and you can overlap it like that much if you want to. But then the seam allowance would be this much. So does that make sense? So from corner to corner is the most important thing that you can worry about. Doesn't really matter the seam allowance, but you want at least 1/4 inch. So we'll just take these to the sewing machine. We'll be using just a basic color of thread that will match your fabric, a straight stitch with the length set at about 2.5 to 3, and we'll be using 1/4 inch seam allowance, or wherever that notch is. Facing your strip facing up, grab another piece. And obviously this isn't going to work, so I'm going to flip it around, overlap about 1/4 inch there, and 1/4 inch on this end. Line up your edges, starting at the notch. Make sure that I just bring my needle down to make sure I am in the right, adjust it till you're right in that notch. Take a few stitches and back stitch, and then continue to sew down and making sure that I'm going to end in that notch, and then back stitch. There you have it. I've sewn from that corner to this corner notch, and you want to get rid of those little ear tags. Just clip off those little flaps there, and when you open it up, voila! Isn't that the coolest thing? So let's continue until we've used all of our strips. So don't let this confuse you. So this isn't working, so I'm going to flip it around, find the other end, and then it will match this way. Overlap the edges, point here, about the same, starting at the notch. off your ears. It up. So I think that's it. Take it to the ironing board where we'll start pressing and folding. As you can see, there's different sizes of the bias tape makers, and the blue one, which is the 1/2 inch, is the one that I like to use most frequently. So to get a 1/2 inch bias tape, either single or double fold, you will cut the strips at 2 inches. And the red one, that will make a smaller, like a 7/8 inch bias fold, single fold, and you'll cut the strips 1.5 inches. The yellow one, that will make a 1/2 inch bias fold, and you'll start with 1 inch. And this little orange one, to get a 3/8 inch bias tape, you start with a 3/4 inch strip of fabric. So you might be wondering what I would use the different sizes for. This is the 1/2 inch of what we just cut out and I use most of the time. This one right here, and if I folded that in half, you see how the edges are folded, and when we pull, when it comes out this end, it just folds those edges in really nice. But look how small that is. And if I were to fold that in half, look how teeny that would be. This would make a cute trim, or the other small one, when it's folded in half. So this is another small one, but you could use these for like ties on a project. You could also bind a very, very thin fabric, a napkin or something, with these small edges. But look how cute, look how fun, and the things you can do. So this I didn't use to bind an edge, I just used it as a trim. And all I did was put it face down. The edges are already folded over, really simple, and I just top stitched along the edge. And this is what this red strip looks like on the denim. So many fun things you can do with this bias tape. Let's go now. Let's get working on the strip that we just made. So we already have an angle that will feed through. If you were starting with a straight edge, you would want to just make the end a point so it goes through the bias tape maker easily. So as you slide it through, it's just not quite coming through. To help feed that through, just take a pin, stick it in there as far as you can, and just take a pin and kind of ease it down until the point comes out. And then all we're going to do is start pulling it through. So woven fabrics slide through really easily. Knit fabrics, not so much. Knit fabrics, you really don't need to use the maker because you can just sew the edge and fold it over and then fold it over. So if I were not using this to make my strips, you could still just easily fold it in half and press, and then fold just the 1/4 way and press, and just do this all the way down. So it is doable without the bias tape maker, but I'll show you how slick it is. So there you'd have your manual tape like that, or just it'll start to just fold itself, and you'll just bring the iron right behind it, and use steam because it will give it a nice crease. I'm just going to pull it and press. Is that just the coolest thing? Love it. So I'll show you what it does on the, I'm just going to kind of give that seam a press. And as it'll be a little, you'll have to tug it just a little bit, and it might be, so you can just manually fold those down right after the seam. Not a big deal. Just make sure that ta-da! So you'll get about 4.5 yards of binding and bias tape from a fat quarter. Here's your single fold bias tape. So to make double fold bias tape, all you do is fold it in half and press it. So there you have it, your double fold bias tape. And what I love to do is take a 5 by 2.5 inch piece of cardstock or oak tag or a cereal box that you can cut out and just wrap it around. Don't pull it when you're wrapping it, just gently wrap it around. This is one of my favorite parts, actually. Looks like it just came right from the store. But you don't see trim like this at the store. You can make so many fun, unique clothing items, accessories with this custom-made bias tape. So, get out your fabric pieces, and on your next project that calls for bias tape, just make your own and have it be the cutest thing ever.